In this field test, we're using the Tamron SP 15-30mm F2.8 Di VC USD in the company of Rishi Sanyal, DPReview's technical editor and our resident lens expert. Equally at home hiking through the countryside of Washington State, as he is behind test charts in our studio, Rishi is a keen photographer who uses lenses like this quite a bit to shoot waterfalls, landscapes, and cityscapes.
We should take some pictures probably, shouldn't we?
Nah, let's just enjoy the experience.
We've been very excited about this lens since Tamron first showed us a prototype. And now that we've got our hands on a shipping sample, we wasted no time getting it on a camera and seeing what it could do. The Tamron 15-30mm is a wide-angle zoom for full-frame and APS-C format digital cameras. At a constant f2.8 maximum aperture, it occupies a very small niche of lenses. It should appeal greatly to landscape, interior, and astrophotographers. Comprised of 18 elements in 13 groups, the 15-30mm is a large, heavy, and very well-built lens. Part of this bulk is due to the inclusion of a vibration compensation system, which is unique among lenses of this type designed for full-frame imaging. The built-in vibration compensation is one major differentiator between the Tamron lens and its competition. The other is price. At $1,300, the Tamron 15-30mm might not be quite as wide as some of its competitors, but it is significantly cheaper. Before we take the 15-30mm out into the wilderness, we wanted to try it out in Seattle's famous public library. Well known for its unusual architecture, the unconventional geometry of the library makes it a great place to test wide-angle lenses. 15-30mm is a perfect zoom range for capturing interiors, and we're also hoping that the library will be a good subject to test for distortion and sharpness across the frame.
So I've got a cool looking escalator here. I like the color, and I'll get down low, look up. Got a lot of receding lines going off into the distance, and since this has vibration compensation, I'll just use this slow shutter speed. If I could have you walk towards it or maybe go up and...
Do you want me to go up and come down again?
Yeah, let's do both.
All right, happy to do that. Just
it.
tell me when.
All right, go ahead, Barney. That's cool.
The blurrier I am, usually the better.
I wouldn't say that about you.
Thank you.
I think that's a nice level of motion blur right there. So that's about 1/10 of a second.
The public library is one of Seattle's most well-known buildings. It contains enough glass to cover 5.5 football fields, and enough concrete to cover 10 of them, 1 foot deep. Personally, I like my libraries wood-panelled, and as far away from football fields as possible.
It's pretty dim in here, and
it's
easy to blow the red channel. So.
It's like being in Stanley Kubrick's nightmare.
But regardless, it's a fascinating space, and the 15-30mm allowed us to get some really interesting perspective.
So we're up on the 10th floor mezzanine. This is the lookout over the atrium, and Rishi's already wishing that he had a wider lens than 15mm.
Well, you'd be surprised actually. Just stepping back to 14mm or anyway, every single millimeter makes a huge difference on the wide.
That's true,
so
actually, yeah. It doesn't much at the telly end, does it? But
exactly, that's right. But I like these grills. They're kind of cool,
yeah.
Whatever these are.
It'll stop you from falling off.
Right, yeah. And as I take the shot, I'll zoom the lens a little bit to give a sense of, like you're falling, hopefully. That's kind of cool.
That's nice.
From the quietest place in our city to one of the loudest, we've come to the Jose Rizal Bridge, which overlooks Seattle's SoDo and downtown areas, to shoot one of Rishi's favourite subjects, the city at dusk. We're hoping that this test will show us how sharp the 15-30mm is from corner to corner, and also give us an idea of its chromatic aberration and chroma characteristics. The better the lens, the sharper extremes of the frame will be at wider apertures. We'll get an idea of chromatic aberration performance by looking for green or magenta outlines along edges, and we'll get an idea of chroma performance by looking at point light sources at the edges of the frame. Chroma performance is critically important for low light shots like this, and for astrophotography, where every stop of light is precious. Reviewing the edges of the image at 100%, chroma is barely an issue, even wide open at f2.8, but that's impressive for a lens this wide. And speaking of wide-angle lenses, 15mm affords a unique perspective for this particular scene, as the extra wide capture allows us to tilt and distort the image after the fact. The only other way to have done this would have been to use an expensive tilt-shift lens when shooting. The next morning we left the hustle and bustle of the city for the woods. It's spring, which is a great season for shooting waterfalls, one of Rishi's favourite photographic subjects. We're headed to two, Panther Creek Falls and Falls Creek Falls, which can both be found to the south of Seattle, near the Oregon border.
Alright, so one thing, it's unusual in a lens of this specification, this wide and this fast. is built-in vibration correction. We want to test that, obviously.
Right,
So
exactly.
we're going to try not to use a tripod
Yeah.
and just see if we can keep it stable enough without one.
Generally for waterfall photography, not having to use a tripod is really nice because if you're down in the creek, it's just it's so much easier to not have to set up a tripod.
I wouldn't want to drag one down that trail either, to be honest. So.
I will by myself, but I won't take you with me.
That's very...
With Panther Falls in the bag, we got back into the car and went off to set up camp.
I'm getting wood. Apparently it's hilarious to Americans.
Barney,
Yep.
you think this will burn?
Try it. Rishi's just molesting a tree.
We missed the recent solar storm by a few days, but even though there was no aurora borealis, the clear skies gave us a great opportunity to shoot a time-lapse of the stars revolving around our campsite.
So one thing that astrophotographers care a lot about when they're shooting the stars is the coma performance of wide lenses. How well the lens renders point light sources, the stars, wide open. So you can shoot wide open, and that's known as coma. So we can look at the coma performance of the lens. A poor lens is going to have bad coma or a lot of coma, and those point sources are going to spread on the sides. A good lens, they'll stay as point light
Keeps
sources.
nice and focused. All right,
Exactly.
Ooh, that's nice with
That's actually quite nice.
Wow.
By letting in a lot of light, you can actually focus using live view. Because if your lens is not fast, if it's like an f4, f5.6 or something, it's so dark and so noisy that you can't even focus.
Yeah, it's all just noise.
Yeah, so here, f2.8, we can actually zoom in. It's pretty noisy, but we should be able to find some stars that we can focus on.
The next day, after a long and sleepless night wondering how Panther Creek got its name, we packed up camp and set out for Falls Creek Falls.
What's the plan, Rishi?
Well, unfortunately this road's blocked off early, so we got an extra 2.5 miles to hike in.
Several smaller waterfalls along the route gave us a chance to set up a few shots, and again, to test the Tamron 15 to 30mm vibration compensation system at slow shutter speeds.
Right, Rishi, why don't you talk us through what you're doing here?
Well, I have it at about just base ISO 64 here. F11 allows me to get away with a fifth of a second without blowing any of the water, any of the highlights to white.
The smaller waterfalls that adorn the trail gave us no clue at all as to the majesty of Falls Creek Falls.
Wow, that's stunning.
I've honestly never seen anything like it. Water thunders down over 300 feet in an incredible and incredibly loud stream that flows over 3 tiers. A constant mist of water droplets boils up from the basin of the falls and covers everything, including our camera and lens, with a thin film of water inside minutes.
Wow, the water just lifts right off this thing.
I wish we had a polarizer to cut the reflections on the rocks and make the greens come out, but you can't use that with this huge front element. But I think we can make do. It's a really stunning waterfall.
The Tamron 15 to 30mm has advantages and disadvantages when it comes to photographing waterfalls, and in fact landscapes in general. It's sealed against moisture, which is a plus, and water droplets can be wiped off the hydrophobically coated front element very easily. Its inbuilt vibration correction system is also a major advantage, and we found that you can shoot at shutter speeds down to around 1/4 and 1/8 of a second at 15mm and still get a decent number of sharp shots. Even on a 36 megapixel DSLR, detail resolution is very competitive against much more expensive rivals.
Okay, Rishi, it's the end of day 2. We just shot the Falls Creek Falls. And what's your take on the lens so far?
Well, it's a great value. It's a versatile lens. People on a budget are going to appreciate this lens because it's reasonably priced, but also gives you great optical performance. Gives you the versatility of 15 to 30, the vibration compensation, the f2.8 aperture, lets in a lot of light. There are some downsides. It's big and heavy. There are wider lenses. The really huge front element kind of makes it impossible to use filters. So for the waterfall shots, we couldn't use an ND filter, and there's no little slot in the back for gel filters either. Usually you want to use ND filters to make the water blur, so we couldn't do that. It's a solid option for people wanting that wide-angle zoom, but are also on a budget.
Overall, the Tamron lens is a superb alternative to similar on-brand lenses, and it brings something entirely new to the table. Both a maximum aperture of f2.8 and vibration compensation, all in one wide-angle zoom. Until next time, I'm Barney Britton from DPReview.com.